Welcome back, everybody, to Brew Between the Lines podcast. This is your host, Caden Nadsett, and I hope everybody has had a good Wednesday so far to this point. Just wrapped up work here a couple hours ago, and it's been a pretty crazy week for me for the most part. And we just keep on going, right? That's all you can do. Got a lot of things to talk about here sports-wise today. Want to touch on a couple different topics. Want to start it out here in this episode. Wanted to congratulate the Boston Celtics. They recently, earlier this week, wrapped up the NBA Finals in 2024, gathered their 13th championship in their franchise, which is second all-time to the Los Angeles Lakers, who currently hold 15 national titles in the NBA. And it's really incredible to me to think about how long some of these teams have had success for. You know, thinking about the Celtics, talking about Bill Russell, some of those guys. I mean, with the Los Angeles Lakers, just guys in the NBA in general, not even specific to certain teams, but I mean, going back to Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I mean, just all the greats of this sport of basketball, and thinking about how long it takes for some of these teams to reach 13 championships now for the Boston Celtics. It's just really incredible if you really sit there and think about it in terms of longevity and how long you have to wait even in spans between the last time you won NBA Finals. It's really cool to see the distribution of who wins year by year and who has stints of success, and then you go into stints, into different areas of your franchise where you're struggling for a lot. And obviously these teams go back and forth with some of this. For example, I think the Magic used to be very good, and in this recent stretch, besides this year making the playoffs, they've been a relatively mediocre team. I think they've got some good things to look forward to here in the next couple of years. I think they're going to continue to improve, but just a lot of teams that are like that, and it's really incredible to think about how long it takes for these teams to get to these double-digit type NBA titles. And obviously some teams have been around a lot longer than others, which certainly helps. For example, the Brewers in baseball are one of the newer franchises to the MLB in general versus somebody like the Chicago Cubs, or New York Yankees, Boston Red Sox, those kind of deals for teams that have been around basically since baseball became a thing. So, but yeah, you just think about it in terms of these teams that have had continuous success throughout their franchises and how long it's taken the Celtics, to get to just that 13th championship. It's you look at the timeline of how long that's taken, and it really is quite amazing at how long that takes. And I think kind of talking about the NBA a little bit more too, I'm not going to obviously spend too much time, but I think this year there's a lot of things to uncover in terms of free agency. We're going to see NBA draft beginning, I think it's a week from today. I think it's the 26th on a Wednesday there, so literally a week from today. That's going to be coming up. Going to be very interesting to see who gets drafted. There's certainly a lot of questions right now around where Bronny James, where he's going to land, and whether LeBron is going to stick true to his word and play with Bronny wherever he doesn't end up getting drafted. I think personally for me, I don't think by any means that he's NBA ready. I think that with LeBron being in the league, I think Bronny coming up would kind of be a tear to Bronny's legacy and what he might be able to do. I think bringing him up so early, and only really bringing him up because you're also getting LeBron then on that same team. So I think let the kid be NBA ready. I do think that he's going to be. He's got some incredible athleticism, displayed that pretty well at USC in some games, but overall really didn't have, if you look at his numbers, didn't really have too much of an impressive year overall. So I think there's certainly a lot of improvement in just his first year at college ball there, but there's certainly a lot of improvement for him. And I think maybe give it another year of development. Obviously, for example, you see A.J. Storr with the Badgers. He just had the 1 year of going from St. John's now to Madison, and look where he's putting himself now, transferring to Kansas, and potentially he's potentially going to get drafted in the NBA this year. There's a chance. He did enroll for the NBA draft, so it is a possibility. And I think somebody like that is very fit for the NBA. But I also think, in terms of thinking back to Johnny Davis, I think that he's 1 year ahead of where he should be. I think Johnny did go a little bit too early. Obviously, from a Badger standpoint, would have loved to have him come back, but it hasn't really contributed since he's come, after being reigning Big Ten Player of the Year, he really hasn't displayed that same kind of athleticism and same kind of success so far at the NBA level. Still definitely has some development to do, still very young and new to the league, but just hasn't had that instant success. And I think as soon as he went into the NBA, we heard a lot of that. It's too early, and that's exactly what we've seen translated so far when he's gone to the NBA. So you just don't want to see guys and these kids ruin their potential, and having one more year of development can really go such a long ways, and it's really incredible just to hear everybody's story. Some guys are NBA ready and develop on the go, but some guys seem like they need that one more year of development in college ball and end up being really good players as well. So, but yeah, I think going back to what I was saying, I think Bronny is still at least a year, if not 2 years out from being NBA ready. Going to be interesting to see what comes of this NBA draft, but just a lot of things. Free agency, going to be some questions, especially like Chicago Bulls, for example, around Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, what they're going to do there. DeMar made it sound like he certainly wants to stay with Chicago, but also wants to bring over some pieces. So management's going to want to do some things there to kind of enhance that relationship with DeMar, if that's the case. And just going to be a lot of other people as well that there's going to be some questions around in terms of free agency. Going to be fun to see what comes of it and what moves we make, as it seems like in the NBA it has become a much more almost like a transfer portal, honestly, if you think about it, in how easy and often it is now for these guys to jump and make these super teams that we like to call them, with Kevin Durant doing that several years, kind of bouncing around with some different superstar players. Devin Booker right now, but previously was with the Warriors and then played with Kyrie at Brooklyn and James Harden and everything. So maybe he's it's just hard to say where these guys might end up. Some of these more superstar players in the league. Going to be interesting to see what comes of that, but definitely some intriguing things to watch for. But like I said, don't want to spend too much time. Going to actually shift back over to what we're usually here to talk about, which is the Milwaukee Brewers. Got through a couple games here on Monday and Tuesday that I'm going to cover, and then just a couple of other things specifically that I wanted to talk about. One guy, since coming back from the injured list, Rhys Hoskins, has been struggling a little bit. Wanted to just talk on that a little bit, touch on that topic. And then also, more interesting, I think, to me, and this is going to be a little bit of a discussion, and might even try and hop on with Trage from that Wisconsin Sports on the Go podcast at some point here this week, and talk about who's on the chopping block right now for the Milwaukee Brewers. Garrett Mitchell, recently, we're going to talk about him and why that's kind of a topic of discussion, but we'll touch on that here and wrap up kind of the episode with that. First, I want to just go over a little bit of what we saw Monday and Tuesday. So yeah, we'll just jump right into that, actually. We'll not wait too much longer on that. Monday, Brewers, once again, offense goes 0 for 9 with runners in scoring position. And we've talked about this so many times, and it keeps coming up when you keep getting numbers like this. And it's been such a big struggle right now in the recent weeks for the Milwaukee Brewers, hitting with runners in scoring position. Bowers had that early 2-run home run in the second inning, but that was about it offensively for the Brewers. Did end up scratching across one other run. Carlos Rodriguez for the Brewers, he got off to a pretty good start there on Monday, then struggled a little bit in the later end of his start towards the 4th, 5th innings. And a little bit of a rough greeting to the MLB for him. Not quite having the same success that we saw Tobias Myers and Robert Gazer have on their entrances into the MLB. Right now he's 0-2, 6.48 ERA for the 22-year-old right-hander. So definitely some things for him that need to improve, but still adjusting to the major league level, of course. Got to give him at least a couple more times. And that'll tie in a little bit interesting to what I talk about there, as well as who's on the chopping block for the Milwaukee Brewers. Because that's the big question, is where from their roster right now is the spot to pull from? Is it the infield, outfield? I've kind of got a personal preference, just looking up and down the roster. I think I've got some decisions that make the most sense from my standpoint, but we'll talk about that here in a little while, like I said. So, yeah, this has been, unfortunately, a big topic that we've been coming back to at the Brewers. The 0-9 for runners, hitting with runners in scoring position. And there were some big key moments in this game that just went for naught, too. Brewers were down a couple runs going into the 7th inning, ended up getting a couple guys on, actually had a second and third with nobody out opportunity, and had 3 consecutive strikeouts. I think it was Gary Sanchez had the first one on a very hittable pitch to a hanging slider. Looked like he must have been sitting fastball. Jackson Churio struck out after that, and then Bryce Terang struck out on a changeup to end the inning there in the 7th. And it's just been those types of scenarios for the Brewers that it just seems like they're trying to do too much. Gary specifically, it looked like he was kind of swinging for the fences with that first couple swings that he took in that at-bat, and just need to, like I said, I think it comes back to changing the mindset and the mentality of your approach. I really do. I think it comes back to just trying to come to the basics, get the ball in play. Don't worry about, necessarily barreling a ball up. Obviously, that's what you're looking for, but more of the focus is put the ball in play. Don't strike out 3 times. I mean, that was 0 for 3 out of the 0 for 9 right there with runners in scoring position. Second and third, nobody out, and you fail to scratch a run across the board in a game where you're losing by a couple of runs. So, needed that if the Brewers were going to have any chance at winning this game. And the 0 for 9 just continues to be a topic and stat on the box score and the sheet that we seem to keep seeing every day almost from the Milwaukee Brewers. Tuesday obviously got the victory 6-3, but even then just 1 for 6 batting with runners in scoring position. So not really much improved. Obviously the one hit that we did see that we'll talk about was a big one, a couple of run scoring RBIs, but that's the thing is you get 1 or 2 hits out of those 9 at-bats, and you're talking about a completely different ball game. I mean, it was 5-3 at that point in the 7th inning. You get a base knock, and it's a tie game. So just thinking about it from that standpoint, a little bit frustrating for sure. Brewers overall still playing some pretty good baseball, but I think that's the big thing. That's the big point that keeps coming back and standing out in the box score pretty much game by game as of right now. So Brewers lose that one on Monday. Tuesday, we jump into that game. Tobias Myers makes a start for the Milwaukee Brewers. He throws another gem, which is really good to see from him, especially with Robert Gazzer still, as of right now, a little bit unknown as to what's going on. The fact that we're not getting any news, to me, is a little bit worse as to getting some news. I don't know if he's gotten that second opinion or third opinion. I can't remember which one it was on now. I know he was getting a few different opinions, but the fact that it's taking longer right now makes me more worried that he's going to be out for the remainder of the season, and we're going to need guys like Tobias Myers to step up. Robert Gazzer obviously was already stepping up in a injury position for the Brewers starting rotation with Wade Miley and all these other guys being out. But to see a young guy like that go out, especially on what sounds like an elbow injury, it's just not a good scenario, and there's nothing good about that scenario at all, and it sucks. The fact that he's going to likely, based on what we're hearing, maybe sit out for the rest of the season. So definitely don't want to see that. But Tobias Myers in this game, 6 1/3 innings pitched of scoreless baseball, ended up straining a runner in that 6th inning that didn't come across. And looking at his stats, last 3 starts, posting a perfect 3-0 record, 20 1/3 innings pitched, and a .44 earned run average, which is just ridiculous over a few starts. And at his age and what he's able to do, and he's one of these guys, he's not throwing 98, 99 miles an hour consistently. He's sitting in the lower to mid-90s. He can ramp it up there to 95, 96 when he's really needing it. But for the most part, he hovers around 92, 93, 94, and has some very respectable stuff. He's playing his fastball off, and what we've seen from him in the recent starts, I think these 3 starts really kind of stick out to me the most, is when he came up, those few starts that he had at the beginning, he was struggling with those walks a little bit. Those walks were giving him a little bit of an issue, and we've seen that cleaned up a lot. We've seen him clean that up a lot here in these last few starts, and that speaks to that success. Looking at both walks and hits per inning pitched, which is that whip stat that you see, just a .69 whip through those 3 starts, which is really low, meaning that he's allowing way less than 1 runner on base per inning, which is very good for a starting pitcher. Usually, starting pitchers, I think you take about 1 as your whip is generally speaking a pretty good a pretty good whip, would be at that 1.0 range. Usually, generally, that's a pretty good number. So sitting at .69 is incredible. 15 strikeouts over those 3 starts as well. And yeah, I mean, you can't really talk much more about this guy right now than just being on a hot streak, kind of filling in for even Freddy Peralta, who is struggling right now. If you go back and look at those 3 starts, Myers in those 3 starts has been our ace in the last 3 starts. Obviously, nobody's saying that yet, talking about what we're going on, but just covering those few starts, he's been the ace in those last, whatever that is, 2 weeks worth of games or so. He's been really good, and we hope to see him do that, as we're going to need some more of that for sure in games to come, especially as we learn more about what's going on with Gazer. Hopefully, we do hear some good news. Maybe it's just a tweak or something, and he's able to come back, but I'm honestly and dishearteningly enough not very hopeful on the news that we're going to get about Robert Gazer. But a couple other things to talk about in this game, actually quite a few still yet. Christian Yelich hits home run number 200 in his career. Congratulations to him on reaching that milestone in his career. And he had said that he was sitting on that 199 for a little while, and getting that 200 was seeming to be a little bit difficult. But he said getting that off that shoulder, hopefully, getting that number off his shoulder, getting those, it always seems like those round numbers, those goose egg type numbers are the ones that are the hardest for these guys to get. Those zeros are the most evasive, certainly, for these players. So hopefully he's, if he was pressing it all, didn't really show it with the numbers he's been putting up. But I would love to see some more home runs out of him, out of that 3-hole spot, and put some more runs up on the board and continue to get some hits with runners in scoring position. Hopefully that's the case, as that's obviously been that point of struggle. But congrats to him on number 200. And this play, quite a ridiculous play. Jackson Chourio, that one hit with runners in scoring position in this game, came with 2 outs and recorded the fastest home-to-home time at 14.7 seconds, which is even faster than the Cincinnati Reds' Elly De La Cruz speed this year, which is pretty incredible, because De La Cruz, I think, arguably is the fastest man in sports right now. Maybe Tyreek Hill's got him by a few steps, but that's also a completely different type of running. Tyreek Hill, obviously running routes, but when he gets up to that top speed, it's because he's running a straight vertical route. But in baseball, you're turning 90 degrees or so, every 90 feet. So it's definitely a lot more difficult to maintain that speed in Major League Baseball, I feel like, for certain. But to reach that, I think Chourio hit a 29.6 feet per second speed at one point during his run from home to home, which I actually didn't go back. I didn't go back to see if they credited him with just the double and the 2 RBIs, but I realistically think that this had an argument to be an inside-the-park home run. Obviously was, but it was considered a Little League inside-the-park home run, not actually scored as a home run. But anytime you have a ball that's rolling and it kind of interacts with the wall just as the same time that the player is going to field it, which is exactly what happened in this case with the right fielder for the Angels at that point. He basically went to pick up the ball, but at the same time the ball kind of caromed off the wall, and it was almost like he was trying to pinch it up against the wall, and the ball kind of squeaked away, allowing Chourio to round to third and get home eventually. But I totally think that could be deemed not an error, because it seems like anytime you have kind of an incident with the wall there, it's definitely very hard sometimes to field the ball, especially at that angled wall. But would have been nice to see Chourio get the home run credited to him. I think that would have stood out a little bit more, but I'm sure he'll take the double, got the couple RBIs, and just getting him across for that extra run was crucial for the Milwaukee Brewers in this game, and just a really big moment, really exciting moment watching to see him do that. And then one more huge play in this game. We talk about this guy on defense all the time, but I don't think there's been a play this year better than this. Sal Frelick makes just a ridiculous catch to end the game, saving what would have been a game-tying 3-run home run by Taylor Ward with 2 strikes at that point in the at-bat. And looking at this, the Brewers really shouldn't have even been in this scenario. You're going into the 9th inning, up 6-0. Okay, you throw in Eliezer Hernandez, maybe, gives him a run or 2 cushion. But he has to come out of the game, didn't really have great command. Yoel Payamps comes in, he struggles as well. And then Trevor McGill, even in just that one at-bat, what nearly would have been a home run, forgetting that Sal Frelick made just an incredible catch out in center field. Would have been a tie game, and that would have been very disheartening, certainly. You have such a good game, clean game all the way through. Defensively, no errors in this game, really good game. And then to blow it pitching in the ninth inning, that just would not have been a pretty scenario. But thank goodness to Sal Frelick, and I think we've tipped our hat to this guy so many times. In center field, right field, wherever you put this guy, he makes plays. And we've seen a couple home run robberies just this year. I know Blake Perkins did one there in St. Louis. I think there might have been one or two other ones. I think he robbed one against the Chicago Cubs, too, at one point. That was Perkins out there. But Frelick has made some ridiculous catches, and him and Perkins both in the outfield just continuing to impress on a day-in, day-out basis. And got to tip your hat. Saved the game in this case, and Brewers win this one 6-3. Just a crazy game talking about all the things that happened. Yelich, that 200th home run. Myers, an insane start. We saw Jackson Chourio, fastest home-to-home time, like I said, and then Sal Frelick capped it off. Just seemed like you had a whole timeline of all amazing things that happened in this game, and some really cool things. And that is why we love the sport of baseball. You get to see a lot of that fun stuff day in, day out. So that kind of will move on from what we saw Monday, Tuesday. I want to talk about some of these other little topics that I was mentioning. Just going to talk about this strictly in a quick moment here with Rhys Hoskins. Ever since that injured list return, we've seen him struggle a little bit. I don't have any stats that I pulled up or struggles, but I think everybody knows that's been watching. He's been kind of struggling at the plate, and they were mentioning it last night in the announcement, and I hadn't even really noticed it actually until last night. I do think I took a brief look at his numbers, but I can't list any of them off the top of my head. But he did get a hit last night, and hopefully that kind of breaks him out of the funk that he's been in. But it just hasn't been pretty. He's seen the batting average kind of dip down. He hit that home run in Philly, obviously, in that return to his previous hometown. But since then, it's really been a struggle for him. And hopefully he's able to kind of snap out of it, probably still trying to get into a little bit of a rhythm after hitting that injured list. And you really thought that he hit that injured list at the worst time, right? He was hitting a hot streak just as he went into the injured list, was finally feeling like he was getting some consistent positive at-bats and outcomes with the bat. And just as that happens, you get that tweak, and he goes on the injured list for a couple of weeks and still coming back now, trying to find that rhythm back of missing that time. So hopefully we're able to see him come back, but just wanted to touch on that and kind of make some light of what's going on in that scenario. And hopefully he's able to kind of snap out of it and definitely provide some much meaningful offense when he is right and doing well. So now on to the really interesting topic that I think about. This is the one that I was wanting to talk about last episode, but we really hadn't heard too much on Garrett Mitchell and his rehab assignment. But now we finally have some news. In his latest game in Triple-A Nashville, hit 2 home runs and really has just been heating up the more regular playing time he's been getting here recently. So that brings up the question, who for the Milwaukee Brewers right now is on the chopping block? And I was looking at the roster here just before I recorded this and just trying to go through what options I think are most suitable for Garrett Mitchell coming in and taking a roster spot. Looking at the pitching, I don't think, based on how thin they are right now, I think some names could make sense. I'm going to throw them out there because I think that it is a possibility. I don't want to completely roll it out, or rule it out, rather, words today. But I think Eliezer Hernandez is possibly on the chopping block, maybe, for now. I think he's probably safe. I think Carlos Rodriguez is the other guy that I'm looking at. I think both of those guys are probably okay. I don't think the pitching staff right now is where the Brewers want to go. They've already had so many up and downs with some of the pitching. I think Aaron Ashby maybe could replace one of these guys, but I don't think it's going to be Garrett Mitchell that replaces one of these guys. Just because I think we need to maintain what we have for pitching. We're already so thin, especially in that starting rotation. Hoping to see Devin Williams return here in the next month or so, but I think those guys are safe. Realistically, I don't think the pitching is where the Brewers are going to want to go after. But there's a few other guys that make the most sense. And looking at the roster, I also don't think that the outfield really makes much sense. I mean, realistically, you've got Chourio, Yelich, Perkins, and Frelick are your main 4 outfielders. Sometimes you throw Bowers out there. He can play a little bit of outfield. I know Monasterio's been out in left field a couple times. And I think Oliver Dunn, I don't recall if Oliver Dunn's played any outfield, but he hasn't even really seen, neither Monasterio or Oliver Dunn have really seen much playing time here as of late. And I really think those are the 2 guys. I think Andrew Monasterio, Oliver Dunn, primarily infielder position, second or third baseman. For Dunn, primarily third base. And I think these guys are the guys that are going to be on the chopping block. I think, we have quite a bit of infield depth overall. We've got a lot of infielders. Don't really seem to need too much more help in that. We've got Ortiz, Adames, Turang, Hoskins. Sanchez can play first. Bowers can play first. Monasterio, Dunn. So that's 8 outfielders. I might be missing one. I don't think I'm missing one. But in case I am, 8, maybe 9 outfielders if I am missing one. And only 8 infielders and 4 outfielders. So I think it would make the most sense to take either Monasterio or Oliver Dunn. And they also just haven't been impressing me too much on the field. Haven't really been getting consistent playing time. Maybe get thrown in like a pinch runner position or a late time defensive swap or something like that. But for the most part, these guys really haven't done too much to impress me as of late. And it really hurts me too because I really like Monasterio. I think his energy is great. He gets along with a lot of the guys in the dugout. Oliver Dunn hasn't really impressed me in too many realms so far, maybe defensively. He's made some pretty good efforts defensively at third base, but otherwise outside of that, not really a ton of growth that I'm seeing throughout this season. So I think one of those 2 guys are probably the main candidates for getting cut and sent to Triple-A in replace of Garrett Mitchell. But I do think, looking at this guy's numbers, and again, I didn't bring any in this episode to list, but if you guys want to go after, take a dive into some of them, they're not jumping off the board by any means. I think Jake Bowers actually is a possibility. He hasn't played the greatest first base defensively in the last little while. We've got secondary first baseman in Gary Sanchez, secondary catching position in Gary Sanchez as well. I can understand having Jake Bowers there more regularly to play first base. It's primarily been Rhys Hoskins and Jake Bowers at first base, obviously. But with Rhys Hoskins being healthy now, Gary Sanchez being able to play first base, maybe not a super sound first base, but Jake Bowers, as I noted, hasn't been playing a super sound first base either. So I don't want to rule out the possibility that Jake Bowers could potentially be the guy that's on the chopping block. He hasn't been really hitting offensively outside of that home run on Monday's game. He did have a little bit of a hot streak there that he was having some pretty consistent at-bats, but pretty high strikeout rate for this guy and not drawing a lot of walks. So primarily where he's been in that 5 or 6 hitting position in the lineup, just not quite the outcome that you're hoping to see from Jake Bowers. So I definitely want to thank that guy. But like I said, just to wrap it up, I think Andrew Monasterio, Oliver Dunn, probably the top 2 candidates. Not exactly sure, obviously, when Garrett Mitchell will be returning exactly, but I think they're primarily probably the ones that we're gonna end up seeing go. But that's basically the big topic that I wanted to talk about. I think it's a very interesting one. I think it would be a very interesting one to talk about with somebody else. Get another guy on the podcast here and just chat about that if we could here before any moves actually get made. But just something to think about, and something to think about also if they don't get sent down, something to think about who gets maybe replaced, or something I talked about before, who's maybe one of the primary trade candidates to pick up a starting pitching piece, or some other kind of piece to fill a hole that the management might see in the Brewers roster. But moving on from that, want to just quick cover a little bit of what we're going to see here, previewed here in tonight's rubber match for the Angels-Brewers series here in Anaheim. Brewers are sending Freddy Peralta out on the mound, and he's going to look to come off the struggle bus. He's had a couple of rough starts, and I think the big thing for him is going to be trying to get some early outs. And obviously, this you probably say about any guy that you're ever trying to say about a starting pitcher going out there and having success. These things are probably going to come up. So this is very broad and not anything super specific, but I think it's worth pointing out. And something that Freddy Peralta has not been able to do in his past starts where he's been struggling. He needs to try and get some early outs, big thing for him is stay ahead and try and eliminate and stay out of those deep pitch counts, because that's been the thing that's really been hurting him. He gets those high pitch innings, high stress innings with guys on base, and he's surrendering runs and just doesn't even, after that first inning in a couple of those games where he's throwing high 30s and even low 40s pitches in just that first inning, it's like, well, this guy's not even going to be able to go very long now anymore. So, you look at that and it's like, okay, well, it'd be nice to get 5 innings out of him, but if he can have a 15-pitch, 20-pitch even first inning, the option for him to go 6 or 7 innings, which is much needed with kind of the overworked bullpen, I think, for the Milwaukee Brewers staff. Tobias Myers obviously helped that last night, but even then had to use 3 guys in just that 9th inning, so still ended up having to use 4 guys across the board, and would be nice to try and limit some of that relief pitching and bullpen work. But on the flip side, Brewers will be going up against Tyler Anderson for the Angels, who has been by far their best starter thus far so far this season. 2.58 ERA for the left-handed pitcher Tyler Anderson. And I think the big thing for the Brewers offensively is going to be the complete opposite. I think they're going to need to lengthen some of those at-bats, look to draw some walks early in the game. And I think another big thing that'll play well for the offense and for Freddy on the mound is, I think, putting up some early run support, maybe getting to Anderson before he settles in, first of all. Get a couple of runs off the board, get him uncomfortable all the way through the start. But then also Freddy Peralta for him pitching on the mound after having a couple of consecutive home starts. I think getting some early run support for him is going to be crucial. I think it's going to help him settle in, help him gain some confidence in his pitches, and look to keep the offense out there as well when he goes out there. Try and get out of the inning as quick so the hot offense can get back out and put up some more runs against Tyler Anderson. So I think hopefully we see something like this play kind of hand in hand in this game, but certainly much easier and obvious for me to say on this end as opposed to the Brewers actually performing and getting that kind of output. So last thing I want to talk about, because I'm not sure that I'll be able to get an episode out tomorrow kind of wrapping up the series, so I wanted just quickly to preview a little bit of what we'll see in that San Diego series when the Brewers head to San Diego against the Padres versus, of course, the Milwaukee beloved Manny Machado, which, of course, I'm joking, but had to throw that out there, and I don't like him whatsoever. I think he's come around on me a little bit lately. I haven't really seen too much in terms, but I don't think I can ever forgive exactly what he did in that NLCS with that Aguilar incident at first base, the oversliding at second base on Orlando Arcia, and just the whole thing. Even before that, he had some rough times with the Orioles and some incidents before that had caused some trouble as well. So I think he's kind of matured and is not so much of a dirty player, but at one point he was, and I feel like in my mind, once you are, you kind of always are somewhat, especially when he does what he did against the Brewers. But obviously, no reason to stick on that topic, but always fun to see. Obviously, we won't see it this time, but Brewers fans always booing him is always a fun sight to see. But Brewers offense in this series will face both Dylan Cease and Michael King, who both had really good starts in Milwaukee against the Brewers in that series earlier this season. So it'll be interesting to see if we have a different approach. Cease recorded, I think it was 10 or 11 strikeouts in that start. So Brewers are going to need to look to put the ball in play more and just have some better approaches, try and lay off, because that guy has some ridiculous off-speed stuff, and that slider and that knuckle curve, I think, is what he throws, and it's pretty ridiculous and nasty. So, yeah, offense obviously going to need to look to make a little bit of an adjustment against that guy and hopefully put some runs up on the board. And at least, I think in that series, Padres' record doesn't still show exactly, I think, the talent that's on that team. So I think if the Brewers can even out that series at 2 games apiece against San Diego, I think that would be a positive outcome. But obviously, always looking to come out and win the series. And then just one other thing that stood out to me, I was looking at the standings today, and I really love that the MLB has finally started to kind of expand the standings and actually show you some run differential stats and some different things that are actually really kind of interesting and I think really important to look at as well. But splitting up the records right now, Brewers 21-18 on the road. So obviously over this stretch with the last game here today and against San Diego, looking to maintain at least above 500. But overall, Brewers playing a lot better at home, 22-12 record at home, and especially as of late, going back to they've won the last several series, going back to that sweep against the Chicago White Sox. They finished that series off against the Cubs. That was a 6-1 homestand. And then they got a couple of series victories against the Reds and the Blue Jays, and went 4-2 in that stretch. So that's a pretty good stretch, 10-3 in your last couple homestands, and that kind of reflects the 22-12 at home record. And then another thing, just looking at that means right now Brewers at 21-18 on the road. That's 39 road games versus just the 34 so far home games in this season. And I think by the All-Star break, it usually evens out. I don't know if it'll exactly be half and half by the All-Star break. But that just means from right now, the Brewers, the remainder of the year is going to be more home games. And speaking to the record and speaking to just in general, it seems like how they play at home is great. Playing in front of the Milwaukee faithful is going to be amazing. As always, give myself and some other fans, obviously, more chances to go watch them play. Because you look at it, that's 81 games at home in a season. So you're still talking, 47 games left at home. So you're not even halfway to the amount of home games that you've played this season. So going to see some more baseball at home. I love watching the Brewers play at home. I really love American Family Field. I think that it's a great stadium, and the additions that they've done to it in the recent times. And just in general, it's always been a really fun ballpark. But I think the fan interaction that they've added to it in the last several seasons has been pretty incredible. But the fact that the Brewers have winning records both on the road and at home are very important. That's always what you're looking for in a winning team. If you see sometimes there's some teams that are completely lopsided, way more home wins and an under 500 road record. And especially when you're going into the playoffs, having no idea where you might end up playing, whether it could be a 3-game series on the road, could be a 3-game series at home, could jump the Brewers right now. Way too early to tell, but could potentially be battling for that 1 or 2 seed to get that first series bye to advance straight to the NLDS. So you never really know, and so you need to be able to play well both places, I think, opposing and at home. I think it's very important for all of the successful teams to be able to do that. And if you're going to have success and make a deep postseason run, obviously you're going to have road games, and you're going to need to have some success and win some games on the road. So it's going to be interesting. And just kind of stuck out to me in that standings, those standing stats, and I really like looking at those because some of those stats are very interesting. And like I said, I think they're very important to telling and separating some of the mediocre teams versus some of the more elite teams so far this season. Just looking at the numbers, so that will pretty much wrap up everything I wanted to talk about here today. Hopefully, you guys are able to get out, enjoy some more of your Wednesday. Enjoy the rest of the week into the weekend. Got a baseball tournament that I'll be attending here for my brother this weekend. That'll be the first for me. I've been to some of his other league games and stuff, but still have yet to attend one of the baseball tournaments. So, going to get outside, have some good times. Hopefully, weather is okay there, where that tournament will be. But other than that, don't really think there's a whole lot more going on that I really wanted to touch on. So, with that, just wanted to let you guys know, as always, BrewPod Between the Line podcast is always available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and other mainstream podcast sites. So feel free to listen to this podcast from wherever it is you may like. In the future, I can always be reached on social media using @brew_pod on Twitter or by searching BrewPod Between the Lines on Facebook or Instagram. Hopefully we see another series victory to make it 4 in a row, I believe it will be, for the Milwaukee Brewers with a victory tonight. Before advancing, like I said, to that 4-game series against the San Diego Friars, as they call them. But the San Diego Padres is obviously what we all refer to them as. So with that, we'll see you guys next time. Talk to you soon. And of course, go Brewers.